Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us virtually here at the Maryland Center for History and Culture. We are about to start our program, Talking Charm City Theaters with John Waters. Thank you so much for your patience. We had a little bit of technical difficulty, but we're here ready to go now. Our program today, we're hosting a nostalgic, homegrown conversation where our guests will share souvenirs of Baltimore's movie theaters. I am Margot Kopera, Manager of Public Programming, and I want to thank you, all over 350 of you who are logging in today to be a part of this program with us, and unquestionably to hear from our guest, the Baron of Bad Taste himself. So without further ado, to begin our program, please allow me to introduce my colleague, Joe Tropea, MCHC Director of Artist Engagement and Curator. Hi, Joe.
Hi, Margot. How you doing?
We're doing great. Well,
I'll
let you get started.
Great, thanks. So what we had planned today was going to be a conversation with John and Amy Davis, who wrote the book Flickering Treasures and also conceived of the exhibition Flickering Treasures, which we have open now at the Maryland Center for History and Culture. Unfortunately, due to some technical difficulties, we could not get Amy on the Zoom with both audio and video. And so we've been scrambling the last few minutes to try to fix that. My hope is that at some point she will come in, we'll get it figured out. But in the meantime, I would like to introduce our very special guest, John Waters, and welcome him to our Zoom. Hello, John.
How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm glad it isn't my fault technically. Usually it is.
Well, thank you for bearing with us. It looks like until we can get Amy in here, I'm going to be asking you all the questions.
All right.
But I want to start by thanking you for doing this. You are part of our exhibit in part of the video that we show, talking about the different parts of the exhibit, which we have broken down by a few categories, movie palaces, neighborhood theaters, Black theaters, and finally theaters today. So our discussion today will sort of adhere to the chapters in our exhibition. Before I start asking you questions, I want to congratulate you on your new book, Liar Mouth.
Thank you.
I have not yet gotten my copy, but I need to get myself over to Atomic Books to pick one up. And I can't wait to do that. As I said, hopefully Amy will jump in at some point. But let me just start with the first question.
Yeah.
Can you talk about what you remember about going to the movies as a young person? Was there a theater that you considered your neighborhood theater?
Yeah, I think the Towson movie theater was what I considered my neighborhood theater. But the first theater I probably ever went to was the Rex, way before it was a nudist camp theater. And I saw The Wizard of Oz there. I believe, though, the first movie I ever saw was Cinderella, and I think it was at the Senator. I went to the Senator to many birthday parties. They had that room in the top there where you could rent a screening room. It was very glamorous as a child to go to a screening room thing for birthday parties. But I thought that 3D movie there, Buona Junction, whatever it was called, I saw that in 3D. I think it was called that. But the Towson movie theater, the way movies opened then, it would open first run downtown, play however long it played. Then it would come to the neighborhood theaters for maybe a week, and that would be the Towson, and then it was gone forever. You never saw it again unless it came on television 30 years later. There was no video, there was no DVD. You could never rewind, you could never see the magic tricks. You could only remember what was left in your mind. But the Towson put out a little program every week that had the ads for it, and I collected them and everything and pretended I owned a movie theater. So I went to the movies very, very early. And then that was the first one. We'll get to later, but in the beginning, it was the Towson, the Senator, and the Rex before sex.
If your first theater experience was the Senator, that must have been pretty great. At that point in time, the Senator would have been a one-screen movie house. Is that correct?
And it amazes me today that people prefer to go to a mall theater than the Senator. It seems that way from looking at the grosses. The Senator still is a great theater and a great place to see a movie. I don't understand why people need to see stadium seating unless it's Ben-Hur is playing, maybe. But so the Senator was a huge part of growing up. And later, all my movies premiered there. Out front on the sidewalk from all the different premieres we had there. So that was very important. Later, the Charles was a big part of it too. But right now, in the beginning, the first art theaters I ever went to were the three downtown: the Playhouse, the 5 West, which is now where the Parkway is, and the 7 East. And the Playhouse was the famous one, and they served espresso coffee. That's what was for intellectuals. So you could look at breasts in Bergman movies and drink espresso. And Bergman played in Baltimore the first time, not at the Playhouse, at the Rex as a sex movie. They renamed the titles and just kept the sex parts in and repeated the breast shots. And I even have ads for the concession stand where you could get a Monica hot sundae and stuff like this, which is really shocking when you look back on these beautiful black and white art movies that were the hits of really the hits of art theaters that later played as sex movies in Baltimore, which is pretty funny.
Well, as someone who gets a coffee when they go to the movies, which, on the surface, it doesn't sound like a good idea. You're probably going to be getting up. It makes me wonder, like, what took them so long to figure out to serve coffee or espresso in a movie?
I never get espresso. The reason was because it was always European films. So it made you feel European. People had never heard of espresso coffee in 1960 in Baltimore. It was not a thing people even knew in any way. And the movies would play there sometimes for a year because there was no other way to see it. They would play, like Never on Sunday played forever and ever. And different movies played in those 3 theaters that I think was owned by the Schwabers. And those theaters really formed my whole knowledge of art movies, of going to them. Later, it became the Charles and the Little, before the Little went to the Little X, before the Little became that. But I always went to exploitation films too. And I would hook school and sneak downtown to my favorite, the Howard Movie Theater on Howard Street, that opened at 8 a.m. and it was 20 cents. And as the day went longer, the price got more. They let anybody in. They never asked if you were hooking school or anything. And the bathroom, which was fairly active at the time, was in the front of the theater. So every person that went to the men's room, you had to parade in front of the whole theater. And if they liked what they saw, they'd come down and join you. It was a movie-going experience that no one will imagine today. But they had double and triple features of every kind of movie. So it was like a repertory house, but for B-list movies, kind of, which was really important, really, really important. Later, the Charles became an art theater, but that's where Polyester premiered also. So we did have that. And then later my friend Pat Moran ran it, and it's still a great theater. And the 5 West is now the Parkway, which was at the time, how many people have been to a movie theater with a balcony? The Parkway has it. That's where everybody wants to sit now, which is weird because you go in, you don't know there's a balcony. You go downstairs and think it's empty, but the whole balcony is filled.
It is my favorite spot in there.
Yeah. So I think movie going in Baltimore, and I also went to the drive-ins, and the Timonium drive-in I grew up in. I got arrested in the Carlin's drive-in for underage drinking, and they took us all away in a paddy wagon. And the Benji's drive-in at the time, very different than today, that is all family films, was the hard R-rated violence movies, the Herschel Gordon Lewis movies. They were the real Kinko ones, and we loved to go there, but it was really far away from where I lived. Always at the drive-in, we would drink, underage drinking, and I would forget and not take the speaker off the pole when I left, and pull out my father's car and break the window and drag the whole pole with me. I had some crazy experiences in the drive-in. And when we filmed Cecil B. Demented, we filmed on the roof of the Benji's drive-in for a whole week for the finale scene. So I think that made me finished with drive-ins. Not true, though. At the New York Film Festival 2 years ago in the pandemic, they set up a drive-in at the Bronx Zoo, and I showed Solo and Climax, two movies that would never, ever play in a drive-in. And it was all hipsters and intellectuals. And in the drive-in, you used to honk if you ever saw breasts or gore. So I told honk if you see art. So every time there was an art shot, people would honk. It was pretty good. So drive-ins are back, at the Provincetown Film Festival. I showed Kitten with a Whip and Night of the Lepus, which is about giant killer bunny rabbits with Janet Leigh. So, and I showed for the Maryland Film Festival a drive-in too, set up at Lake Drive over in the park over there, Druid Hill Park. Yeah. So I went to every kind of theaters, and I knew where they all were. I knew what they specialized in, like the Patterson, which was always action movies, or the Grand, which was B-list action movies. And they were both in East Baltimore and Highlandtown. And the Boulevard, which was after it played at the Senator, it moved down there. And so and the Waverly, which is the Goodwill now, that was even C-list. That was even better. I liked going there too.
So I just want to go back to your youth again. Why Wizard of Oz at the Rex? Would that have been a movie that your parents took you to?
Of course. I was like 6. I didn't go to the movies by myself. Yeah. And at the time, my parents lived not far from there in Gobins, and that was where you went to the movies. That wasn't anything. It's so hard to ever imagine, get the Rex that it become out of your mind. But then it was a first-run movie theater, and the Wizard of Oz was where it was playing. And of course, everybody's parents took them to see the Wizard of Oz. So it's still my favorite movie ever. So that's where I really got the bug, certainly.
So thank you. And we've talked about the Rex in other contexts. Maybe it's best to leave that lie.
Well, I don't know. I got some good stories about the Rex. I went and interviewed the man who owned the Rex at the very end when he was in a nursing home, and he showed me his scrapbooks, and they were just like my scrapbooks. I used to pretend as a kid I owned the Rex, and used to cut out all the ads for the movies they told us were condemned in the Catholic Church, and pretended I booked them and put them in. It looked the same. And he told me that he would go to the censor board, and they would cut out scenes, and he'd say, okay, and then just go and put them right back in. They never came to the theater to check. So he had some great stories for me. And the Rex was an amazing place. Forever and ever and ever it was there. And what happens to all porn theaters, they close, become churches, and then go out of business. But the most outrageous sex theater here, there was the Apex, which we filmed The Dirty Shame in on Broadway, that lived in peace with that community forever. But the most shocking, the Earl, which was a heterosexual porn theater that mostly gay men went to. And I saw people walking nude to the popcorn stand. Never will that kind of theater come back. It even shocked me, the Earl.
My grandparents lived in that neighborhood, so the Earl loomed large for me as a kid because I'd always pass it. And
but
I would wonder,
it was like the Towson or somewhere. It was the neighborhood theater. But
right.
The Earl existed as that X-rated public sex place for years and years, at peace in that community. Nobody really ever picketed it or anything. They didn't go there, maybe, or if they did, they didn't tell anybody.
I mean, no one in my family knew that that's what went on at the Earl. And I tried to imagine passing by it. I wonder what goes on in there. I don't think I would have imagined.
Imagine that. And it was really the ugliest people I ever saw too. I hate to be, they weren't cute. It was frightening. It was like the movie Trolls goes to sex. I don't know. It was a staggering experience to go to the Earl.
I believe you. I wanted to ask more about neighborhood theaters because we have lost some recently. The pandemic took out Cinebistro. But prior to that, like the Ideal, people were trying to do stuff at the Ideal, bring that back. I'm wondering if you were given, and I'm going to give credit.
The one you just mentioned, that was in the Rotunda. That used to be the Rotunda. I'm amazed that one went out of business because it was always crowded. And it seems that is what people want today. I don't, but it seems I'm in the minority. They want it to eat. They want it to be fancy. They want it to be suburban. They don't want it to be downtown revived music, beautiful palaces or old theaters restored or something. It seems like that is what they want. So I'm amazed that one went out of business in a way.
I'm with you. I saw one movie there and I struggled very hard to stay awake. The chairs were way too comfortable, and they bring you food, and that's just an invitation to doze off. I found it nice in a way, but not exactly conducive. And, you can hear people eating next to you. Not an ideal movie going experience, in my opinion, but I am sad that it has gone. This is a question Amy was going to ask you. If you were given the keys to one shuttered Baltimore movie theater, which one would you pick and what would you do with it?
Maybe I'd do the Boulevard, because I think Waverly needs an anchor, a bigger one. And that's a beautiful big theater in there, and have it programmed as a calendar house, like maybe the Charles used to be. Have maybe 2 or 3 changes a week of double features of all kinds of movies, and do a great kind of refreshment stand with only older candies, which you still can get. And have it, I think I would do the Boulevard. That's where I would. I mean, the downtown theaters, we can get to them because that's a whole different
We
thing.
will.
Okay.
Yes. If you had to pick your favorite theater that wasn't in your neighborhood, what was your, as a younger person, what was your preferred theater to go to?
It would be the Playhouse, because there I saw foreign films. That's where I saw Fellini and Bergman and the first tastes of foreign films. So to me, they were very important. Not only did they break the censorship things, that's who broke the laws, because they did nudity in a tasteful way and socially redeeming, as the Supreme Court always said. But that's where I saw whole new cultures and a whole different kind of movies that I wanted to enter. So I would probably say the Playhouse.
Great answer. I wanted to talk about, you alluded to it a little bit earlier, but in several of your films, you have used Baltimore theaters as shooting locations. And I know I recall the Benji scene that's in Cecil. Can you talk about why you felt it was important to shoot in a real movie theater? And was that a challenging thing to do?
Well, Cecil B. DeMena was about film terrorism, and it opens when they kidnap a movie star at the Senator Theater premiere. Cecil B. DeMena, the entire credits were every shot of every shuttered movie theater in Baltimore, the Boulevard, all these theaters we've been talking. It's maybe the last record of it in a way. But what's put on the marquees are ridiculous sequels that were then ridiculous, that are almost completely true today and not ridiculous today because it really happened. I'm trying to think. The Benjis was in A Dirty Shame, had the Apex in it. And it was funny because we filmed there when it was opened, and we had, I guess I can't tell you about that scene, but the New York Times did a fashion shoot to promote it for the fashion magazine, and we did it in the Apex, and it was opened. So this was a Sunday afternoon. So the people that were walking around think, damn, there's some hot looking men here. There's Stephen Dorff and Adrian Grenier. They didn't know we were shooting a fashion shoot. It was the New York Times or anything. They thought it's a good day at the Apex.
So that's interesting. The theater stayed open for a photo shoot. Obviously, you rented the theater and shut it down to
when we shut it down. The Apex was lovely to work with. They were great. We shot a whole thing in the concession stand. It's a fairly comic, controversial scene that was shot in the Apex that really wasn't too far what went on in there every day, but they were great to work with. I had no problem with them. They even let us put a marquee up that really was obscene, and we put it up for just 2 minutes, enough to get the shot and then quickly take it down. They were very, very cooperative, as was Tom Kiefer when we made The Senator. In the Charles, we shot when they were coming out of watching supposed porno movie. We shot at the Charles. I shot in many theaters in Baltimore. We shot at the Patterson, the Earl, a lot of them for Cecil B. DeMena. We might have the outside might be one theater, but inside would be somewhere else because we couldn't get that location or the location at the time for timing and everything. But we shot in movie theaters all over Baltimore then, really right before many of them closed.
Was that a smooth process, or were there any funny incidents where people wanted to come into the movies and didn't understand, that
Once I know we shot at the Edmondson Drive-In, and it was a joke that it was a fancy art drive-in where they served champagne and people wore evening gowns and stuff. And that came true later when the Provincetown Film Festival took over the Wellfleet Drive-In, and we had a benefit with Kathleen Turner there, and they served champagne. So it almost came true. But the joke of this that was on the marquee was 3 Marguerite Duras hits. Marguerite Duras is a very intellectual French film director, but never have her films ever played in a drive-in. But one of them was called The Truck, and people kept trying to come in. They thought it was an action movie. We kept saying, no, it's not really playing. And the Truck, you wouldn't want to see it even if it was here. But no, nothing goes smoothly when you make a movie, but it went smooth enough. We always rented the theater, so it was closed. We never had real customers in it. Like in the old days when I shot in the little tavern, there was a scene where Divine is the waitress and just the real customers are in there, and we just shot it. They didn't even seem to react. Baltimore was always very supportive of me shooting anywhere, to be honest. I never had any trouble except the censor board.
And hopefully we'll get to that also. I feel like there would be an audience for a movie called Truck, unfortunately, but
The Truck.
we'll love The Truck.
The Batman now. That was brilliant. I'm going to change mine to The Hairspray. A movie called The Truck. There probably already is one. There's one called The Car, which is about a killer car. So, and there is a movie about a killer truck. Spielberg made it. So it's just not called The Truck. But yes, right. It's not impossible to imagine why people wanted to come in.
So I want to ask you about one of the first things you see when you come to see Flickering Treasures is a section on the movie palaces, the really grand houses. And I'm wondering if you can talk about it. Did you get to see movies either, say, at the Mayfair or I guess it would have been the Stanton, not the Stanley during your
in the town, and the Hippodrome, I saw all the first one movies. So there, Cleopatra played there, the big premiere of Cleopatra. Later, I saw every blaxploitation there, and every of the kinkiest, hardest hitting blaxploitation movie that would never play. They're so politically incorrect that they could never play. Well, they could, I guess, but I doubt they would. But it went from being the most famous Cleopatra, Charlton Heston, big biblical movies, to later, just as crowded and just as popular, the really extreme blaxploitation movies before that ended. And I know white people always like to say, I was the only white person there. I was, though. I'm telling you. And I remember during gore movies, everybody just lifted their feet when the rats ran around the theater, and they'd yell, green. I didn't know what that meant. Green meant gore. But it was quite an experience. I went to the town and carved in the door, somebody had written, if you come through this door, you be kilt. K-I-L-T. I thought, oh, gee, that's encouraging. This is at the very end. And in the town, we shot Cecil B. DeMenter's hideout, the wrecked town theater. And so even though we said it was the Hippodrome out front. So I went to all the theaters in the beginning when they were the premier place in Baltimore, to the end when they had exploitation films, and then finally probably sex movies, but not hardcore, right before hardcore happened. And when hardcore finally happened, the only place they ever played was the 7 East, which became the Aurora. And they busted Deep Throat every single day and just gave them a new print. And then they just put the next print in because it was, I guess, worth it. But so I went to every movie theater in Baltimore, high end, low end. I went to them no matter what they were playing.
Well, you mentioned blaxploitation, and that's a good opportunity to talk about the history of our city, which you can't ignore segregation. So, a lot, as I see the pattern, as demographics shifted and white flight occurred, theaters kind of had to change. Some went the way of showing X-rated material. Others became what you might call like a black theater. So I'm wondering, were you aware of the way segregation was playing out when you would go to a theater that maybe a few years earlier had a different
I don't remember. I certainly remember segregation in Baltimore. I remember the Northwood. I remember, everything happening. I went to the first demonstrations I ever went to was against George Wallace running here and stuff when I was in high school. So I knew about it. Did I know Were Black people allowed in the Towson Theater when I was young? I don't know that, to be honest. I don't remember they weren't, but hardly was it a, a all Black audience. I do remember seeing ads of all Black movies playing sometimes one night at different theaters. I think even the Timonium Drive-In sometimes had that. But this were films that were never marketed to white people, so we didn't even know about them. But this was not blaxploitation. The blaxploitation were giant hits. Every theater wanted to play them. They Coffee and Tamara Dobson, Baltimore's own. She was a huge Black star. She was next to Pam Grier. The premiere of a movie called Slaves was here with Dionne Warwick, and it was at the Hippodrome, or the newer one. I remember I went, and it was the first premiere ever, and they had the red carpet, and Dionne Warwick stepped out of the limo, and somebody yelled, "Give me $1, bitch, give me $1," which made me laugh so hard. I've never been able to forget it because she wasn't expecting that. But Baltimore is where they tested blaxploitation movies. It was where they tested them. The audience was so huge for them. And we would go, they were packed. These movies were, and I used to look in Variety every week. And in the old days when I got Variety really young, and Variety had the grosses for every theater in Baltimore. Every week you could see it. And unbelievable the amount of money that those movies made at the top. So they were not, this was not when they were on the last legs. They were making way more money than they would have if they were playing Charlton Heston movies.
Right. Before we move off of this, one of my favorite areas in town is where I am right now, near the Howard Street corridor. And so you mentioned the Little Theater earlier. I'm for a while that was called the Mayfair too. It was like right across the street.
The Little was also real arty for a while. It was art movies, but then it became the Little X at the end.
Right.
Yeah. But the other one you're talking about is the Royal, which I did go to in my life. I saw the Motown Review there when I was in high school with little Stevie Wonder and James Brown I saw there, which was really amazing. But that was a movie theater too. They showed movie theaters. Yeah. And there was another Black movie theater over there, and I forget the name. I never went to that one though. That's one I did not go to.
So your experiences at the Royal were more musical events than movies?
They were to see live shows.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I actually did get jumped there once. And I met James Brown way later in life at Bloomingdale's, of all places, to meet James Brown. And I said to him, I know every white person says to this, that I saw you. I was the only one. I said, but I got beat up when I saw you, and it was worth it. And he laughed.
That is quite a compliment. I don't want to switch topics too hard here, but there is a screening room in the city, or there was a screening room in the city that most people never got to see or even know about. And that was the screening room at the censor board. Yeah. And we could talk about Mary Avera, and we have for hours. So I don't really want to go there.
I don't have hours worth to say about her. But the screening room, the most odd thing is they watched 3 movies at once, because they could not cut dialogue because of the Supreme Court ruled that they couldn't go. So they would watch them silent, and she would sit there and yell out, "Cunnilingus, reel 2, rear entry." I heard her say that, rear entry. I've never heard that in my life. And she would sit there and call that out. And I had to take my films in there. And she handed me scissors and made me cut a brand new print. And believe me, I didn't have a penny then of every cent that I had put in to get these films and make me cut out. And she said, "You can't show that vagina." I said, "Well, that's a man." And she said, "Don't tell me about sex. I was married to an Italian." What do you say when somebody says that? It's funny now. And that's why she went on television, because everybody laughed at her like a fool nationally. She was on Johnny Carson and stuff. But there was no reason that she had that job, really. And we were one of the last censor boards ever in the country. There was Dallas, I think, and us were the last 2 that had them. And I should have just done what the guy from the Rex told me. I never thought that. Just say, okay, and then just go put the clip right back in. She didn't come to the screening to really see if I cut it or not.
But you actually went in there and saw the setup with them watching 3 movies at one time.
Yeah, with this projectionist that looked like I cast him. That's all I can remember.
Yeah.
Okay. And I forget where it was. I think it was all the way downtown. I forget where it was, but because you didn't have to go there. Believe me, all the distributors didn't go there or anything. But since I had a print, and I would never show them to her when we opened the films in churches and at universities, it was outside her jurisdiction. But whenever it was going to play finally in a theater, and I think the first one she saw was Multiple Maniacs, and she went crazy and went to court. And the judge said, my eyes are insulted for 90 minutes, but it's not illegal. And so, but when it finally played at the Charles, which was the first place that ever commercially showed my movies way later, yeah, it had to go to the censor board. That's why when Pink Flamingos first opened at the University of Baltimore, or all the movies opened in churches, she didn't have to see them then because it wasn't like a theatrical booking in a real theater. It was off her radar, really.
Right, right. Well, okay. So you mentioned the Charles, and that's my next question. A frequent collaborator of yours, Pat Moran, for a time ran the Charles.
He did. Yes. Yes, it was owned by a person in Washington. I'm just going blank. I know his name. Who owned the Biograph and the Key, and he then opened the Charles. And Pat ran it, and she was great at it, and she worked there for many years, and we hung out there every night, and that's why the Club Charles opened across the street, because then it was a scary bar that we liked, but the city was really against it. So we talked Esther into making it the Club Charles. So it was David Levy was who owned those theaters, and he owned the Charles, definitely, and was from Washington.
And this too was when the Charles was a one screen. We now think of it as a 5-screen movie theater, but there was just one screen, and
the famous ballroom was next door.
Yeah.
And then later they bought that and made it the bigger thing. And my movies still play. Just this summer, all my movies played at the Charles on a repertory thing and did quite well.
Yeah.
So the Charles has always been kind of a center, certainly, for people, and now there's the Parkway too. So it definitely is the film block.
So anyone who's ever seen a movie at the Charles or the Senator is very likely to have seen a public service announcement that you filmed.
Hello, I'm John Waters, and I'm supposed to announce there is no smoking in this theater, which I think is one of the most ridiculous things I've ever heard of in my life. How can anyone sit through a length of a film, and especially a European film, and not have a cigarette? But don't you wish you had one right now? And I'm telling you that smoke anyway. It gives ushers jobs, and if people didn't smoke, there would be no employment for the youth of today. So once again, no smoking in this theater.
Can you talk about, I mean, I know a lot of people in Baltimore have seen this play before a movie.
See it. There is no copyright. You can show it.
Yeah.
I did it for the New Art Theater in Los Angeles that played Pink Flamingos for 10 years. And they asked me to do this thing when I was just thanking them for paying my rent and playing the movie for 10 years. And they had just this extra film at the end of the reel and said, do anything. And I just ad-libbed it. And they started showing it, became a hit. And then they sent it to other theaters. It went all around the world. It played at the Charles. There was even contests of people doing my non-smoking commercial. And so it went further than we ever imagined it would go. And now I hate it when I go into the movies and I sink down when it comes on. I think, oh God, please don't have that all the time. But it's fine. But they still show it sometimes.
Yeah, that's a great backstory to that. I assumed it was made here, but
no, it was made at the New Art Theater in Los Angeles that played Pink Flamingos at least one night a year for 10 years.
Wow. Well, thank you for clearing that up. So I know we're getting on with time, and we want to have some audience questions. So I'll start wrapping up. But are you? Let's talk about movie going today. I mean, obviously, there's the Parkway, which you're still involved with, the Maryland Film Festival.
Yes, the Maryland Film Festival, the Parkway, the Charles. If I go to any other theaters in Baltimore, it might be out in Towson because that's, a way I know. Those are probably the theaters that I go to. I do live in a lot of cities, so I see movies all over the country. I do a 10 best list for art forums. So I must admit, all the distributors of the weirdest art movies will send me screeners because they want to be on my list. Because if I don't put them on, nobody else will. But still, when I'm going to see a real movie, it would definitely be the Charles, the Senator, and the Parkway. Yeah.
And are you back to attending film festivals in person?
Yeah, I just did I did a 20 city Christmas tour. I mean, last year, no, 16 cities. Yeah, I just did the John Waters camp where 500 people come and live as me, as my characters for 5 days. I'm hosting a giant punk rock festival in Oakland next weekend. Yes, I am. I wear the mask and I am social distance because I'm on stage, really. It's not like I'm in the mosh pit.
Right. Do you think
one day maybe I will when I turn 90?
Did you attend any virtual festivals? I know, like,
Oh yeah.
for 2 years that was all we could do.
Yeah.
I personally didn't love that
I hate
experience.
Zoom. There's technical things. I mean, today I'm in my Zoom studio that's at least lit well, but when I'm home, you look horrible. Mostly you look fine today. You have good light. You have a good angle above. Most people don't know that they shoot up, which means you have triple chins. Never shoot up with a needle or with a camera. That's one thing to learn young.
That is great life advice. Wish I'd have heard it sooner. So do you think festivals are coming back? I mean, as you're attending these things, are audiences what they were?
Yes, I went to I did a book tour this year, but also I went to 2 festivals in Europe, and I do my spoken word show, and people definitely are back. They're back. People are still getting COVID, but they don't die.
Right.
So that's the big difference. So yes, it's back. COVID has changed everything for the worse. And movie theaters are really struggling because the people that supported art movies were older people. And that's the one group of people that has not come back to the theaters. So come on, old people, we got your shots and come back to the movies.
Yeah. I try to get out as much as I can to the Charles and the Senator and the Parkway.
We all need it. I mean, every business on any theater in Baltimore is not what it used to be. So
Right.
everybody says, oh, I love those theaters. Well, go then. You can, lip service doesn't pay the bills.
Yeah. So we did a program of for Flickering Treasures maybe like a year ago, and it was with Scott Iman, who's a film historian and writer, and film producer Karen Chen, and we got into this whole debate about big screen versus small screen. And I suppose Scott Iman and I were there representing the old people, saying it's an abomination to not see something on a large screen if you can. And Karen brought up that, most of the world is watching things on small screens, whether it's including iPads or phones. Well, what do you make of it?
I watched a movie last night on my computer. It was the only way to see it. I lied in bed and watched it. My early films, I wish everybody saw them there. You don't see the mistakes. I wish they watch them on a tiny little phone. They look better. They're not blown up as big to see all the mistakes. It's a different time. That's all. It's never going to go back to what it was completely. Nothing does in history. Things change, and you have to be either one step ahead of it or inventing a new way to do what you did before. It's never going to go back to that. It's never going to go back to people only see movies in movie theaters. That's not going to happen in my lifetime or even somebody that's born today.
Amy was going to bring up that you made something somewhat recently on your phone or for the small screen. I wish
Kitty Flamingos?
It was a video that you made for an event or
well, I think she's talking about that was an art piece. That was a video art piece for an art show, and there's just an edition of 5 called Kitty Flamingos. That's not on my filmography. I don't count that as part of my movies. I count that as a visual art piece I did in an art show in my whole other life in that world. And the Baltimore Museum did buy it, and they did show it, and it's in their collection. That is when I reimagined Pink Flamingos as a G-rated version and had all children do a table read of it. Yes, I think that's probably what she's talking about.
Okay,
that was never meant to be seen straight through in a movie theater ever.
Okay, and that says volumes that you don't consider it as part of your catalog. So
no, I think it's good. It's part of my art pieces. It's
right,
so and so in my whole art thing, but it's not on my filmography. No.
Yeah. So I think I will start winding it down. I want to ask so that we have time for some questions. I think people are curious about Liar Mouth. Is there a chance that you might make another movie, and might it be
Sure,
called
there
Liar
is
Mouth?
a definite chance that I have a couple things in the works, but all my contracts say I'm not allowed to talk about it. So I don't want to curse it. But yes, I'm still in the movie business. We'll see if it ends up on the movie screen, but I get paid to write things that don't get made too. So I'm still in the movie business. Yes, very much so.
Gotcha.
And thank you for worrying.
And you mentioned the BMA, so I wanted to ask about, I believe it's in November, they're opening a show. Can you talk a little bit about that?
That is completely a show of not my artwork or nothing about my movies. It's about, I have a big art collection I've been collecting for 50 years that I donated most of it all to the Baltimore Museum after I die. And this is a preview of that. They're getting everything off all my walls. My apartments and houses are going to look empty. And it's curated by Kathy Opie, a great famous photographer, and Jack Pearson, another big contemporary artist. And they curated my collection, and it's called Coming Attractions. And that opens in November, definitely, at the Baltimore Museum. Yep.
I'm very excited to see that. And congratulations on that. So
they named the bathrooms after me on it. You know, that was the thing. They had to name the bathrooms in the Baltimore Museum, and it's open now, the first all-gender bathroom at the Baltimore Museum. So if you don't go at home, go there when you go to the museum.
I mean, I think institutionally we should take notice of that. That is a good way to appeal to someone to leave a collection. So we'll make a note of that here at the Maryland Center for History and Culture. There's an opportunity we shouldn't miss. Before we open it up for questions, I just want to say again, I'm really sorry that Amy Davis couldn't join us.
And could I say something about what a great book that is, that she did about all the theaters and everything? And it's an amazing book, amazing exhibition. So if you haven't seen that book, it's incredibly interesting and really, really well researched.
It is. It really is. And the images in it are great. We happen to have it for sale in our gift shop here at the Maryland Center for History and Culture. And if anyone out there has not been to see Flickering Treasures, the exhibition yet, it will be open through April, so I urge you to come see it. We recently redid part of it. We changed out the paper ephemera parts, which had been on display for as long as they could be. So we have a whole new selection of theater programs and advertisements on display. So I urge you to come see that. And I also wanted to mention, if Amy were here, I wanted to give her a nod. The Baltimore City Historical Society is honoring her with the Baltimore City History Honors Award this weekend. So Amy, when you're able to watch this, congratulations, you were congratulated. And that's a great honor. And it's for her work on Flickering Treasures as a historian and a photographer. So definitely check out the book and the exhibition if you can. And I think at this point, we will ask Margot to come back and see if there are any appropriate questions from our viewers.
I don't mind inappropriate questions.
We need to try to keep it a little on the PG side, but
I know
I'm not one to censor. So
inappropriate could mean nothing to do with a rape. It could be something else. Like somebody asked me once recently, I did a show, how did you avoid cancer? I thought, well, that's an odd question, but I thought, well, it's a good one. I smoked, but then I misheard them. They said, how did you avoid getting canceled? I'm doing this whole thing about regretting smoking and blah, blah, blah. And they're all looking at me like, what are you, crazy? That's not what they asked you. So well, they were both an inappropriate question that I was trying to handle.
Those are both great questions.
Well, Joe and John, there are some questions that have been popping up. You already talked about the censor board a little bit, but Mark is out there and asking if you can discuss in a little bit more detail your battles with Mary, is it Avera? Thank you, of the Maryland Censor Board.
That she could cut She couldn't cut dialogue, and you had to for your movie to play, she had to pass. You had to have a Maryland Censor Board seal that was in front of every movie. So she could cut it, and she could say, she used to always say to me in Pink Flamingos, I should have cut out that oral scene. I should have cut out the dog duty scene, but she couldn't. She cut out the artificial insemination scene. So, she would decide what, and she would say that it was basically sex was what she hated, and the sex in my movie, no one was eroticized by it. It was usually funny and ridiculous. And the sex in my movie was never erotic, I don't think, unless you're in real trouble. So she just didn't know how to handle that, because it was another joke, really. The sex scenes in my movie were supposed to be funny and ridiculous. And she had no sense of humor about sex in any way, and was perplexed because she didn't know legally how to handle that. So she got meaner and stupider. She was stupid. And I know you're not supposed to speak ill of the dead. I didn't for 20 years. When she died, it's the only time every newspaper called me, I said no comment.
That's very nice of you, John, because there is
I just made up for it.
Anyone
from beyond the grave.
I might plug myself here and recommend anyone that wants to know more about this might want to check out a documentary called Sickies Making Films.
Yeah,
that John was nice enough to appear in. There's a lot more to learn about Mary and the other censors.
she was the main one, though. She was the one that was vocal. The other ones didn't try to get in the paper or publicity. She went on Johnny Carson. I mean, she became a national joke, and I don't know that she ever realized that.
Well, I'm going to move to your theater experience in DC, John. Did you attend any movie theaters in DC?
I didn't much, because if I did, it would mean it didn't play in Baltimore. Later, I did. My films played very much at the Biograph Cinema there, and later the Key. And the Biograph's still depressing. I go by there; it's a Rite Aid now. But I certainly, with my own movies, we had an incredible audience there. I appeared there with Divine. We went there for all the movies premiered there with David Levy, who was a great person that I worked with in Washington my whole life. To go to the movies there, if I ever did, it would be maybe the Avalon or some of the ones, the art cinemas at the time that maybe were playing something that wasn't in Baltimore. But generally, we had the same films. It wasn't like, if I had to go anywhere, I would have to go to New York to see the things that didn't play in Washington or Baltimore.
And that was another absurdity about the censor board, right, John? You could not see something in the Baltimore region or in Maryland, but just drive over into DC and there it was.
Yeah, of course. I mean, when I Am Curious Yellow came out, that was a big one that people banned everywhere and everything. And then Jackie Kennedy went to see it and the grosses tripled that week, So it was all what you couldn't see. And that's like today when people say ban books, don't they realize all that does is help them? I made a career on negative reviews and being busted and being outraged. And Mary Avera helped my career. Every time she banned something, it would get in the paper. And they don't realize that there's whole sections in bookstores of banned books. The book wouldn't be there. There'd be one copy of it in the back, filed spine out, if it wasn't banned. So whenever you ban how you want to hurt a movie or a book, don't ever mention it.
There is a great question in the chat from my friend Webb, and he asks if you ever experienced watching a Spike Lee movie or any big 90s movie at Harbor Park.
Yes, I went to Harbor Park. Yep, I definitely went to Harbor Park many times. And I saw weird movies there too. I saw the Gus Van Sant remake of Psycho. I was the only person in the theater. So I did go there. And at the end, it got raucous, but that was at a different time period. I was used to raucous downtown black theaters. Oh my God. Try sitting there and watching Mandingo by yourself as the only white person in the theater where the end, they're boiling the slave owner in a pot of water. You think, wow, let me get out of here. So I always felt at home in those theaters though. Nobody ever gave me any trouble. I used to take Pat Moran's little daughter when she was really young to see those movies, which I look back, probably I could have been arrested for, but she's in the movie business now and doing quite well. So it didn't hurt her. Those theaters were a huge point of my life, huge part of my life. And I loved going there.
Well, there's actually some chit chat about your international fame, and there's a couple people from Europe, from Serbia in particular, that has some questions for you.
All right. I was supposed to go to Serbia this year. It hasn't happened yet, but I did go to Poland. I've been to a lot of foreign countries, and it's amazing. Like when I was in Poland, that they all knew my movies and stuff. It's just really very, very, very just amazing to me. And
So
very
why
flattering. Yeah.
Sanya is asking, why do you think that is, that you have so many Serbian fans or European fans?
Because the sense of humor unites everybody, and all my fans are smart, they're still angry, and they don't even fit in with their own minority. So they like to hook up with other people. And I think there are enough of those people in the whole world that have that sense of humor, that have let me get away with this for 50 years. Thank you, in Serbia, for whoever wrote that. How do you even know who I am? It's amazing to me, but very, very satisfying. And it makes me feel really great when young people come up to me in different countries and say, wow, you got me through high school. I did? Yeah, that's amazing to me, but very sweet.
One of our Serbian viewers has mentioned Amir Kusturica, and I'm wondering if you feel any kind of kinship with his type of filmmaking.
Well, I think I was on the Cannes jury the year he won. So yeah,
Sure.
if I'm thinking of the right one, I think I am. And of course, there's a really shocking movie called A Serbian Tale, or A Serbian Movie, that is one of the most shocking movies that even I have not seen, but I've heard it's one of the most shocking movies ever made, that did play in America.
Yeah, I wonder if that's an idea for a future Maryland Film Festival pick.
I don't know. I don't know if I have the nerve to show that one.
Oh man.
From what I hear.
Are there any current films that you are watching, or series that you are watching, that you would recommend to everyone out there?
I go to movies all the time. You know, I'm seeing everything now because my 10 best list is due soon for Art Forum. What have I liked recently? I really liked the Francois Ozon remake of Petra von Kant, which was the Fassbinder movie called Peter von Kant. That's my favorite movie I've seen recently.
Wow.
Hadn't played here yet.
Yeah. I'll look for that.
Okay, if anyone else has any other questions for John, put them in the Q&A right now. I think it's almost time to wrap up. John, is there anything else that you would like to say out there to your fans? And
just go to a movie
us?
theater this weekend and pay to go in. Even if you don't stay, pay once, just drop by. If you don't have time, go pay to a movie theater. So, and the best time to ever pay is on Friday night, because that's the grosses that decide if it's going to play the next weekend. They decide Saturday from the Friday night grosses if it's going to be held another week. So if you want to support any movie, go the Friday night it opens.
Great advice.
So there you go. You heard it from John Walters. Waters, we put a lot of information
John
in the
Walters,
chat.
Johnny Depp used to call me that. And I have a collection of signs from drivers at airports that say Walters.
Oh.
It's a common mistake. It happened to my father, my brother. We've our whole life been called John Walters. That's
I put.
Oh, now you're getting thanked in the chat.
Yeah, you're getting
John
thanked in the
Walters.
chat. You're getting thanked in the chat. There's a lot of information in the chat. Don't forget to purchase John's book. See him at the BMA coming up. I think it's November 20th is the opening of that exhibition.
My Christmas show at Christmas show downtown every year. That's easy to find out about.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, it has been an absolute pleasure, John, for you to join us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. Want to give a shout out to Amy again. I'm so sorry we had technical difficulties.
And we're really lucky that there is that book, because it's really the only record of that kind of stuff that I know of. There's another book called Exit that came out a long time ago that's really rare, that has pictures of old movie theaters too. That's really rare if you can find it.
So we've got homework, people. Go to the movies on a Friday night, come see Flickering Treasures, and pick up the book, and also go to Atomic Books and pick up a copy of Liarmouth.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thanks, John.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.